Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to be chatting about my favorite thrillers. Now, I don't know when this happened or how this happened, but my channel has kind of turned into a thriller channel over the past year. I have been in a bit of a reading slump and struggled getting through a lot of other books, but I seem to just make my way through thrillers. And whenever I find myself in a place where I just don't want to read, I have been picking up 3 thrillers and making a vlog out of it. So I will link a couple of those vlogs down below if you want to check them out. But anyways, I thought since it's the spooky season, it would be the perfect time to talk about some of my favorite thrillers of all time. And I'm the kind of person where there are certain tropes in a thriller that are really going to draw me in. And if I'm browsing through Barnes & Noble or looking on Goodreads and I see these in the synopsis, I'm always going to be intrigued to add them to my TBR. So I thought that I would organize today's video in terms of my favorite thrillers by certain popular thriller tropes. And I also thought that this would be helpful for you guys. So if there's a certain thing that you really like in thrillers, and maybe you've read one of the books on this list, you can check out some of the other books that I mention in that same category. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the first trope that I'm going to chat about is cold cases, i.e. the character is drawn into a case that happened many, many years ago. And the first book that I want to highlight is In the Woods by Tana French. So I actually have a full review of this book if you are interested in more of my thoughts. So the cold case in this book is a boy who goes into the woods one day with 2 of his friends, and he is the only one that comes back. And when he comes out of the woods, he looks completely disheveled. He has blood in his shoes, and he's not able to tell authorities what happened to the other children. Now, flash forward, this same boy has now become a detective, and he is drawn back to those same woods to investigate the murder of a ballet prodigy. I think this book really does a great job of developing the main character and the conflict and the struggle that he feels not knowing what happened in this old case that he is right at the middle of. This book is also part of a mystery series, and I have not read any of the other books in the series, but based on how much I loved this book, I'm really excited to dive into the rest of the books in this series. The next cold case book is The Survivors by Jane Harper. This is a story about a group of friends that are drawn back into their very deserted, quiet, beachy hometown, and when they get there, a body washes up on the beach, and this case kind of brings back memories of an old mystery that happened there many years ago. I did a full reading vlog about this book, and I really loved some of the character dynamics in here as they kind of reckoned with their past selves and dove into the secrets that they really didn't want to address. And I also loved how atmospheric this book was. This really deserted, beachy town was described so well, and I just felt like I was there throughout the whole book, so I really enjoyed reading this one. So my next favorite trope is people that aren't detectives investigating a crime, and usually I see this as a reporter, like a news reporter goes to a town to see what happened, but they're not like part of the police force. And my first favorite book in this group is His and Hers by Alice Feeney. This follows a reporter who normally lives in London, but she is assigned to investigate a murder that happened in a very quintessential small British town. And when she gets there, the lead detective on this case is very suspicious of her. And so in this book, you alternate between his perspective and her perspective, and eventually through this very twisted tale you find out the truth of what actually happened. My other favorite book that follows this trope is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. So this also follows a reporter who originally is in Chicago, and she is drawn back to her hometown to investigate the murder of a girl as well as the disappearance of another girl. And when she goes back to this town, she is drawn back into a really dark place in her life when she is surrounded by all of the people that have kind of haunted her past. And specifically, she interacts a lot with her mom and her half-sister. So in between her investigating this very twisty, turny case, she's also having to kind of confront things that she doesn't want to from her past. As a side note, I love Gillian Flynn as a thriller author, and I absolutely adore all of her books, so you will see them cropping up again several times in this video. So my next favorite trope seems to almost be contradictory to the last one that I mentioned, but that trope is a book solved by two detectives that have either a very close friendship or a relationship. I know that this trope is very controversial among thriller readers, and some people just cringe at the forced connection between two people that just seem to have to be together. But I have found a lot of books that have really interesting dynamics between the two people solving a case. So the first one is actually a book that I am currently reading, and that is The Chestnut Man by Soren Sveistrup. When a prominent politician's daughter goes missing, the police think they have the case solved. But 1 year later, a series of murders turns everything on its head when they find a little chestnut man or a little figurine made of chestnuts at each of the murder that has the girl's fingerprint on them. This case is investigated by two people that are kind of thrust together and they don't want to be there. One of them is looking to move up into another position and doesn't really want to still be in this division. And the other one has been part of another crime-solving organization, and now he is forced to work in this police force but wants to go back to his own town and isn't really about being part of this case or working together, but they both are so intelligent and outside the box thinkers when it comes to figuring out what is behind this. And it's really fascinating watching them work together and play off each other. And I really have enjoyed so far reading about their connection. I still have about 150 pages left of this one, but I find it hard to believe that this isn't going to be one of my favorite thrillers, if not one of my favorite books of the year. Now, the next book is going to be one that you've seen before, and that is In the Woods, because while you are following the main male detective that I told you guys about earlier, he is also working with a female detective, and they kind of have this very interesting friendship where he feels scared to tell her certain parts about his life given his relationship to the past case, but she is kind of very smart, and they have this very close connection that's really fun to read about. And my last recommendation in this trope is, of course, the entire Millennium series, but specifically The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. A disgraced journalist is basically called upon to figure out this crime where a very wealthy man's daughter went missing several years ago, and he teams up with a very spunky computer hacker, and together they put their heads together to solve this disappearance and figure out what actually happened. And throughout this case and throughout the series, the kind of friendship that forms between these two characters is so unforgettable. I love how different they are, but how their strengths kind of work together to figure out what is going on. And these books are just so addictive, and some of the first books that drew me into the mystery genre in the first place. All right, and the next trope is books that take place in the middle of nowhere. And this has definitely been done poorly in some examples, but there are definitely some gems that follow this pattern. So the first one is probably one of my favorite thrillers of all time, and that is The Hound of the Baskervilles. A troubled man comes to the office of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson, and he is convinced that a hound is haunting the moorland and has killed Sir Charles Baskerville. And so Holmes actually assigns Watson to go out to this very deserted area and figure out what's actually going on. Is it really a huge hound that is killing people off, or is it something else? This book is so filled with this very gorgeous imagery that just completely sucked me in, and I have to say it's probably my favorite Sherlock Holmes mystery. It's just so great to read, especially during the fall time. Next up, we have Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. When a train stops on its tracks in the middle of a snowy night, the passengers go to sleep, and the next morning they wake up to find out that one of them has been murdered. And it just so happens that one of the world's most famous detectives is on board the train, and he pieces through the evidence to figure out what happened. This is the quintessential closed-door mystery, and oh, it's done so well. The next one is one of my most recent favorites, and that is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. This follows a nanny who is hired to work at a smart home in the middle of nowhere and take care of these kids. But when she gets there, she starts to figure out that this house might be haunted, and all of the lights seem to be turning on at weird moments. She's hearing sounds that don't make any sense. Maybe this perfect nanny job isn't so perfect after all. This is my favorite Ruth Ware, a book that I read in one sitting, and I kind of feel like I need to reread it soon because of how good it was. And it definitely gives you a lot of those deserted, can't get out vibes. And finally is my favorite Riley Sager book, and that is The Last Time I Lied. This follows a woman who is up and coming in the New York art scene, but she is haunted by a mystery that happened 15 years ago at a summer camp when 3 of her cabin mates disappeared one day, never to be found again. Now, one of the people at the camp reaches out to her and asks her if she wants to come back and be a art counselor at the camp. And of course, she is drawn back into this old mystery to figure out what really happened to these girls. This camp is the kind of place where things turn up when they're not supposed to, and everything seems a bit odd. Everyone is suspicious, and it is quite deserted, so it perfectly fits into this trope. And the last trope that I'm going to chat with you guys about is, of course, the unreliable narrator. This is one of my favorite mystery tropes if it's done well, and it has not been done well many times, but these books, I think it's done so perfectly. So the first one is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. When a woman mysteriously kills her husband and won't talk, her psychotherapist, Theo, is determined to figure out what really happened and what was behind this unspeakable crime. Now, throughout this book, you are following 2 people and you don't know what to believe because their stories don't make any sense. It has really short chapters, and the twists and turns in this will just keep you on the edge of your seat. It is such a good read. The next book is one of my favorite books in the entire mystery genre, and that is, of course, Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This is about the so-called perfect woman named Amy, and she is known because her parents made a children's book series about her called the Amazing Amy series. And one day she disappears and her husband is framed for the crime. But what really happened? The twist in this book is so good. You guys, you have to read this one if you haven't read it already. All right, sorry guys, I had to change the angle up a little bit. I had some tripod drama, but here we are. Anyways, the next of my favorite books in the unreliable narrator trope category is Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. One day a woman is in a coma and she is convinced that her husband is behind it, and she can actually hear everything that's going on but just can't speak. You alternate between her point of view in this coma and her childhood diaries from growing up. And you start to learn that she has an interesting past, and you have to figure out who you really believe. This was the book that got me obsessed with Alice Feeney, and I have never stopped loving all of her books. Next up is Final Girls by Riley Sager. A girl goes on vacation with her college friends and experiences an unspeakable tragedy where the rest of the people in her group were murdered, and she becomes known as a final girl and joins this group of people who were the only people to survive some kind of crime. But when the final girls themselves start to be murdered, who is behind it? This was Riley Sager's first book, and as with Sometimes I Lie, this was the one that got me hooked on his books, and it was such a great debut. All right, guys, that is it for my thriller recommendations. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. Let me know if there are any books based on this video that you are interested in picking up and what your favorite thrillers are in the comment section down below. And with that, I will see you guys all very soon with another video. Bye.